And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is our Week 15 Power Rankings for the 2024 MLR season. We are in the last 4 weeks. Well, technically the fourth week, the fourth of the last weeks, has passed us. So we are in the last quarter of the season. The playoff race is heating up. 5 teams have already claimed their spots. We'll go over that a little bit later in the video. And a couple of teams are still on the outside looking in. Only, truthfully, one team is out of... Actually, I think 2 teams are out of contention right now. No, actually, only one team. Only one team is out of contention right now. There are still a bunch of other teams that can still possibly make it. But again, fighting over just 3 spots left. It is heating up as we're nearing the end of the 2024 season. Some interesting results, and I'm gonna be honest with you. One game this week kind of made me break a lot of my rules that I usually have with my power rankings. Again, if you don't normally watch my power rankings, and we're already near the end of the season, but if you don't watch my power rankings, these are all based not necessarily on the win-loss record, who's on top in the conference tables, though it usually works out that way, that the top teams are on the top, losing teams are on the bottom, but it really is about who you beat on the pitch, when you beat them, if you're on a winning streak, if you're on a losing streak, it all factors in, so it does make my decision-making kind of difficult, and I do have certain rules that I try not to break. If your team's on bye, I don't like them going up or down because they really haven't done anything. I don't really like to push a winning team that's very dominant, a high winning team that's very dominant over a losing team to have to move very high, because if you're beating the last place team or the lowest ranked team, and if you're not beating them by like 50 points, there's really no reason for you to move any higher than like a spot, if anything. But if you're dominating over a team that's above you, then that makes a difference. But there is a game that kind of made me change a lot of things that I don't normally like to change. Again, also too, if you win, I don't like you moving down because you won. There's no reason for you to slide down a spot. But like I said, there is a game that kind of made me have to break all the rules, and it definitely made me think a lot for this week. So let's not harp on it any longer, and let's get down to it, because we have, first time this season, we have a new number 12. And no, it's not because Anthem Rugby won. Spoiler alert, they didn't win this week. But there was a team that got completely demolished in a way that was kind of shocking. And honestly, unless your team is Anthem, unless it's a game involving Anthem Rugby, we've never really seen this kind of lopsided score, but it was. Your new number 12 team, unfortunately, is the Utah Warriors, who were destroyed by the Seattle Seawolves, a team that is also really riddled with injuries. They were destroyed 29-68, 39-point difference. Again, we don't normally see that. At least we haven't seen it at all this season. With the exception of games that involve Anthem Rugby. And again, Anthem Rugby, a brand new team, played with a bunch of players that are purposely a young group to develop young American players. Utah Warriors, they have a lot of good players. Now, granted, they do have a lot of injuries. And this game actually resulted in the Utah leading management council to release to release a video statement kind of apologizing for the Utah Warriors losing as badly as they did. Not making any excuses, but they kind of claimed that there were a lot of players that had to be playing in positions that they normally did not play in, and so it kind of resulted in it. But like I mentioned before, weeks earlier, Seattle released a statement about how they lost like 6 players to season-ending injuries. And so again, Major League Rugby, it's a season of attrition. Every team is dealing with injuries. It's not just 1 or 2. Everyone is, except for the Houston SaberCats, shockingly enough. But it was a pretty devastating loss. And again, a loss that the Utah management group decided, hey, we need to kind of address this with the fan base, which I thought was a very classy move by the Utah management group. And hopefully doesn't deter fans because they're having a huge Warrior Fest in the last week of the season. And hopefully they'll have a big turnout. Utah, if you've ever seen Zion Stadium, I've never been there. I hope to one day be there. The stadium looks gorgeous. They have mountains. You can see the mountains of Utah in the background. It is a gorgeous setting for a rugby game. And they have a very, very rabid fan base. Very vocal, very loud, very supportive. Almost as loud as the Seattle fan base. So a lot of really diehard fans, but to be demolished by that big of a point difference, that can hurt any diehard fans' momentum. Plus, two, Utah, unfortunately, second to last in the Western Conference. They are not out of the playoff picture yet. I'll explain a little bit later about things, especially also to my next video. But Utah's not necessarily out. They still have a lot to play for. But yeah, again, that kind of point differential with a team as veteran as the Utah Warriors is kind of concerning. And that is why I had them slide down, because there is almost no excuse. They were the number 10 team, technically, again, dealing with a Seattle team that's also been struggling. They haven't been very dominant. I actually kind of thought maybe Utah could take this one because Seattle's kind of on the downswing. Man, Seattle looked like they did not look like they were losing any players. But again, Utah has been struggling a lot. Let's go into the game. So within the first 10 minutes of the game, 2 Seattle tries, and unfortunately a yellow card also to Joe Hodgson, the team captain of the Utah Warriors. And then, even though there was a beautiful 50-meter penalty kick by Rob Povey, hats off to Rob Povey, he was doing phenomenal as basically the backup kicker for a injured Joe Hodgson. Seattle ended up scoring 7 tries in the first half alone. And it just did not get any better for Utah. Shout out to Jade Stigling from the Seattle Seawolves, who has been a phenomenal player for Seattle, making up for a lot of the injuries that Seattle has. He had 4 tries, boosting up his total record to 9. He is now fully second place of all leading tries for this season, right behind our leading try scorer at number 10, who is Diwal Kotse from the Dallas Shackles. So, phenomenal performance by Jay Stingley. If you watch the game, 2 of those tries were interception tries that were just superbly done. Jay Stingley has been a huge addition to the Seattle Seawolves. Also, too, a brace by Big Joey Taufuete, who is a capped Eagle. Utah, though, did kind of make a comeback near the end. Unfortunately, it looked like Seattle kind of, and rightfully so. I mean, they already scored about 8 tries at this point. 9 tries at this point. Utah ended up scoring back-to-back tries. They also scored a penalty try, which allowed Utah to actually walk away with at least a bonus point. But in the end, the game, 68-29, a total of 11 tries by Seattle. One of the highest total number of tries scored by any team in Major League Rugby in one game. It was a very dominant performance by Seattle. Also, too, big shout-out to focus on, and I'll talk about it a little bit later when I talk about Seattle, Mac Mason, who has a phenomenal 7 for 8 off the tee, 14 points alone in this game. There is a reason why he is the top point scorer still this season. But again, Utah, man, what a lopsided loss for Utah. But again, not out of the playoff picture yet. They did secure that 1 bonus point for at least getting 4 tries in a game that was pretty much all Seattle. Now, moving up a spot, the Carolina Anthem Rugby. And again, the reason why I had them move up, and even though they lost, my rule is if you lose, there really shouldn't be a reason that you go up. But man, they lost to a very game San Diego, 24-34, just 10-point difference. Anthem has really been playing a lot of close games, and their upcoming game against Miami will be very interesting, to say the least. But Anthem, doing a lot to try to stay within these games. And as I mentioned before, a developmental team, purposely with young players, young American-born players who on any other squad would not usually get the chance to start. This is the team that is purposely letting these younger players start to give them a lot of experience, hopefully groom them into National Eagles players. And so there's going to be a lot of growing pains. These are young kids that this is the first and highest level of rugby competition that they've ever faced in their rugby career. So obviously going to be a lot of losses. But man, with the way they've been performing and the way that certain players have been really stepping up for this team, they will be a force to be reckoned with come next season. I guarantee you that. I don't know if they'll win a game this season, but they'll definitely win a couple at least next season. In this game, San Diego scores twice right at the beginning, but of course, Carolina was able to at least get a score at the very end of the first half, so they're down 19-7. San Diego earns a yellow card in the second half. No yellow card counter, because again, the yellow cards, interestingly enough, the penalties and yellow cards have gone down significantly since I started using the yellow card counter. Don't know if there's a coincidence there, but not as many yellow cards this week as well. Within 10 minutes left, San Diego scored another try, but Carolina looked like they started to come back. Shout out to Carolina player and Namibian Cliven Lobster. Cliven Lobster had a brace, 2 tries scored by himself. They were within 7, including the second try by Cliven Lobster. Unfortunately, San Diego's get a last-second penalty kick to allow to increase their lead by 10. So unfortunately, denying Carolina that losing bonus point, because you have to lose be within 7 to get that losing bonus point. So San Diego denies them a losing bonus point. But again, big shout out to Cliven Lobster, a Namibian national, not necessarily an American player, but with Jake Turnbull, the leader of Carolina, still injured and on the injury bench. Cliven Lobster has been really picking up the slack and doing a great job as a leader. He scored 14 points, 4 for 4 off of the tee and 1 try. But again, Carolina just comes up short against San Diego, but still looking much, much better than what Utah did in their game. Moving down a spot, Miami going down to number 11. Moving up a spot, number 10 from number 11 because of Utah losing. Miami, who lost to NOLA, but again, another close game, 13-20 was the Sharks. And NOLA right now is the number 2 ranked team on my power ranking. So the fact that a team like Miami loses to NOLA just by a try. I mean, NOLA barely beat Miami in this game. Miami is, again, proving to be a very dangerous team for their very first year, just barely losing certain games. After 20 minutes, NOLA finally scores a penalty kick. Miami ties up with their own, but then a last-second try in the first half gives Miami the lead of 10-3 going into the half. Unfortunately, after that, Miami was only able to score a penalty kick in the second half. A couple of tries by NOLA allows them to hold on to the win. And even though Miami started to rage forward to try to make a try at the last second, unfortunately, a knock-on at the very end causes Miami to lose possession of the ball. Game ends, and NOLA holds on 20-13. But Miami was this close to possibly getting that try to at least try to tie up the game. But a close loss to them. Miami 13-20 to NOLA. Now, the next game. Easily game of the week. A rivalry game between Old Glory and New England. For whatever reason, Old Glory always plays New England Free Jacks, your reigning defending MLR champions, really, really hard, and this game is no different. Old Glory loses to New England 30-31 by 1 point. Because of that, I decided not to move Old Glory down or up. They stayed at number 9 because this is the number 9 team on my rankings, losing to the New England Free Jacks, who at that time was the number 4 ranked team, up in the upper echelon. And yet they came so close, only losing by 1 point. Old Glory scores right away, and this was being played in Old Glory's home field in Germantown. I mean, the crowd was really into it. That might have helped Old Glory play a little bit harder. They strike first. Wayne Vanderbank gets his 8th try of the season. Old Glory takes the lead 17-10 at the half. New England scores, though, in the second half. But then Jason Robertson, who has been phenomenal for Old Glory, a 45-meter drop kick goal. I kid you not. It was a picture-perfect kick. New England gets a yellow card, but their defense pushes Old Glory around and stops them from scoring. Interestingly enough, once New England got their 15th person back onto the pitch, Old Glory scores a try to get ahead 30-17. Old Glory was piling on to New England. But then, New England fought back with tries by Potros, and they were able to squeak by and get that last second try to squeak ahead 31-30. It was a heartbreaker for Old Glory, and New England is able to walk away with the win. Big shout out, and I'll mention a little bit more when I talk about New England. Old Glory, Jason Robertson was amazing off the tee, so was Jason Potros. Robertson, 14 points, 4 for 4 off the tee, as well as a try. I'm sorry, Jason Robertson, 15 points, 6 for 6 off the tee. He basically helped orchestrate a really big comeback for Old Glory, but unfortunately, New England was able to walk away with the win. But again, because they only lost by 1 point, I kept them at the number 9 spot. Now, this is going to be an interesting discussion. Sliding down a spot to number 8, Chicago Hounds, who lost to the Dallas Jackals 20-22. Another very, very close game. This game could have went either way. It was a little bit of a sloppy game, but in the end, I feel that Dallas was the team that ended up making the least amount of errors and penalties, and that's what allowed them to win in this game. At the half, Chicago was up 8-5, but in the second half, Dallas started to come away. 2 tries scored, one by Tuafua, and then another by Wandy Oliver. Chicago comes back with their own try with 4 minutes left. Chicago scores another try to get within 2, but then Chicago had the chance to, again, score a winning try to break the tie, to break the lead, to get over that 2 points. But in the end, Dallas defense denies Chicago a chance to score, and Dallas holds on 22-20, barely beating Chicago. Chicago just fell short. But just breaking news today, in the end, it was announced by the Chicago managing group, Sam Harris, Chicago, the only coach Chicago has had for the last 3 seasons, has stepped down from his head coaching position. He will no longer be head coach. As I mentioned before, Chicago has been struggling this season. They are currently on a 4-game losing streak. And it looks like, maybe the management has been kind of fed up with how Chicago has been struggling. For a team on paper that looks as good as they do, Chicago definitely has not been doing very well this season. They were on a little winning streak, but now they've been kind of falling down a little bit. Now, interestingly enough, the Chicago Hounds are still well in the playoffs. They haven't secured a spot, but they are in the driver's seat. Again, I'll talk a little later about it. So it's interesting how this played out, that Sam Harris has been booted out of the team. Well, I say booted. They said he has respectfully stepped down. We'll make that up to debate. But interesting that Sam Harris has stepped down with still 3 games left in the season and still a lot to play for. It's not like Chicago is out of the playoffs. They could still make the playoffs. They could still win. I mean, as long as you're in the playoffs, you still have a chance of winning. So it's interesting that Chicago has made this announcement. And, we here at Rugby411 wish Sam Harris all the best. But, he's had a long coaching career. He used to coach Austin Gilgronis. He had them on a nice winning streak before, unfortunately. That franchise closed, transferred over to Chicago, and it hasn't been necessarily great for him. But honestly, Chicago still had a chance this season, which, again, makes this decision very, very baffling. But in the end, Chicago does slide down a spot from number 7 to number 8. Now, moving on. Number 7, the RFCLA, unfortunately losing to the Houston SaberCats, 29-12. I'm actually surprised. This game was a lot closer than what I feel the scoreboard shows. LA, again, unfortunately, just a lot of penalties. A lot of yellow cards. Unfortunately, when you give up 2 penalty tries to Houston, you're not going to win these games. And even a red card as well, you're not going to win these games. But despite all that, LA was only down at the half, 19-12. They were down by a try at the half. And yet, in the second half, Houston kind of pulled away. But, if you even look at the scoreboard in the second half, Houston only scored 10 points. LA scored 6. So it's not like, LA scored 5. It's not like Houston was very dominating. And Houston is the number 1 ranked team in the power rankings. They're the best team in the league with only 1 loss. So the fact that LA played as close of a game as they did, I don't think Houston played their best game, which is very disappointing because LA might have had a shot of an upset. But again, discipline issues for LA, the yellow cards, 2 penalty tries, that's giving away points to Houston, and a red card. It's definitely something that I think LA needs to address. They are the most penalized, they are the most carded team in the league by far. And it's really preventing LA from making a push up in the standings. They're not out of the playoffs yet either. They are the last place team in the Western Conference. They're behind Utah by 1 point, but they're not out of the playoffs yet. A lot of things have to go their way, but they still have a shot. But LA sliding down a spot to number 7 in my power rankings. Moving on, sliding up a spot is number 6 Dallas after beating Chicago. Actually, they slide down a spot. They were number 5. They slid down to number 6. Now, here's where, I don't like breaking my rules, but I kind of had to. Just because of the game with Utah and Seattle. As I mentioned before, I don't like losing teams having to move up, but because Utah did so poorly, I had Anthem and Miami move up. I don't like having winning teams slide down, but unfortunately, Seattle had such a dominant performance. They went from number 8 all the way to number 4, moving back up into that top echelon. But because of that, Dallas and your reigning defending MLR champions, New England Free Jacks, they do slide down a spot, number 5 and 6 respectively, because they had to make way for Seattle. And again, it took me a while to kind of process that and kind of agree with it, but I do like that way because, again, very impressive performance by Seattle. New England barely squeaked by Old Glory, won by 1 point. Could have been different. Chicago almost beat Dallas, by 2 points. So, again, both of these teams were not nearly as dominant over their opponents. Seattle completely destroying Utah. Wasn't even close. Moving into your top 3, shouldn't be a no-brainer. San Diego after their dominant performance over Anthem Rugby Carolina. NOLA after barely squeaking by Miami, but I didn't feel Seattle should jump that high. And then Houston, with their dominant performance over LA, still secures that number 1 spot. So, again, we are getting close to the playoff picture. As I mentioned before, we do have now 5 teams that secured their spot. Houston had already claimed their spot. New Orleans has claimed their spot. Seattle has claimed their spot. San Diego as well. And New England already has claimed their spot as well. So those are the 5 teams that are in the playoffs right now. Teams that are on the outside looking in: Dallas, LA, Chicago, Old Glory, Miami, and surprisingly Utah as well. So we have 6 teams still vying though for 3 spots left. Right now, Chicago and Dallas are in the driver's seat. Chicago and Old Glory are in the driver's seat. Dallas is trying to fight for that spot. Repeat myself. Chicago and Old Glory are in the driver's seat. Miami are trying to fight for that 1 extra spot. And right now, Dallas is sitting in the driver's seat. LA and Utah are fighting for that last spot. I'll go a little bit more into breakdown details on how the playoff picture works, but that's where we are right now. And, it is going to be an exciting finish, I feel. Every game, with the exception of 1 game, and again, I'll talk about in my video in my next one, only 1 game really does not have an effect on the playoff picture. Every other game does. So it is really, really exciting rugby coming up. Now, with that being said, let's go over the SuperBru. we have an impressive performance by our Golden Cap winner. Back-to-back Golden Cap appearances by Frisco Flame. Frisco, congratulations. Great job, brother. And an impressive 10.66 points out of 17 possible. Very, very impressive. Coming in second, a name I haven't said in a while, Harry, 10.33. Jahaigo, another name I haven't said in a while, 10 points. JZS are reigning number one right now, 9.83. Tied with Tex, another guy I haven't said in a while. So a lot of old school names coming back into this week's top 5. Unfortunately, Lady Julia gets the wooden spoon. Now, our top 5 has changed quite a bit, so let's take a look at that. Still at number 1, JZS, 87.66. Because of his good performance this week, his lead over second place BT Woodrow, who's still there at second, who has 79.58 points, has increased from 4 points to 8. So JZS slowly running away with this competition. But then, jumping up 6 spots, 6 huge spots. Number 3, Harry. Congratulations, brother. Your great performance this week got you up to number 3, 77.91 points. And then Sarai jumped up 4 spots to number 4 spot to 77.58 points. And then jumping up 1 spot, Theo God at number 5 with 77 points to round out the top 5. So even though JZS has kind of taken the lead, there is only a 2-point separation between number 2 and number 5. So it's still anybody's game at the back. And again, if a guy like Harry does another great performance this coming week, he can easily jump much closer to JZS. So we'll see. But it's still a very, very, very close competition. I'm not going to deal with the bottom 5 because that hasn't changed for a little bit. I think it's going to stay kind of the way that it is. I've moved up a spot, so I'm happy about that. But yeah, that is our video. That is my power rankings. Yeah, it's gonna be exciting. And again, playoff rugby is coming up. We're having teams fighting over playoff spots. Again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams fighting for 3 spots. It is going to be exciting. And yeah, we still got quite a bit more rugby left. And I am very, very excited to be watching it and reporting it to you guys. So thank you very much for watching my video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the pitch.